Good morning or afternoon or day. I don't know what it is to our Memorial Drive family and friends. This is our regularly scheduled post-sermon conversation, but you may notice we have a guest with us today who is a little bit cuter than Jason, but we won't spend too much time on that subject. My name is Tim Rush. If anybody has wandered in here by mistake, and this is my wife, Kim Rush. What Jason and I do most weeks is we talk about what we preached on Sunday. And generally our prep for this is deciding which one of us is going to intro this and who's asking the questions. And generally it's whoever didn't preach. But this week, Jason and I both preached. And so Kim's, the prep I've given her for this is I'll say, what do you want to talk about? So anything you want to talk about before the questions I mentioned?
Wait, what questions?
Well, the questions are, so what comes up for you from the sermon, or what comes up for you when throughout the sermon series, or what comes up for you when you think about this theme of the voices that go on inside of our mind. So you can jump into any of those things, or you can take it a whole different direction.
Oh, that's fine. Those are broad questions. And those are the questions I thought you were talking about, but then I was like, what?
Yeah, that's, for those of you following along at home, you may not know this, but my education is in communications. And that education only comes in retrospect, when I can look backward and go, I didn't communicate well there. So that's excellent. What Kim has to deal with all the time.
No, those are the very questions I was prepped to receive. So then I was like, blindside. But I had thoughts, during the sermon, and I actually was prompted by those questions too, just to think more about some of the pieces. And so I don't mind starting out just referring back to the verse from Romans.
Yeah.
12. And what I really love about what you guys are doing in this sermon series is helping us each live up to like who we were created to be by God, and addressing what stands in the way of that, but in a kind of in a unique way. And I was thinking about that related to Romans, this verse is talking about each of us being part of the body, and that we're members. All the members belong, and I know comes to say like we each have our own function. And I was just thinking about when we don't live into the truth of who God designed us to be, partly because we believe different things about ourselves, then his body is impaired. And
sorry, say that again. Then his body isn't what?
Well, then his body is impaired and is not able to function the way that he designed and wanted. And so I just was feeling appreciation for the sermon in that way. And it reminds me of a Brene Brown, it's not a quote, probably it's a big long piece of thought, but fitting in and belonging, the difference between those things, and that belonging is being able to be who you really are and not feel like you have to fake it or alter it. And fitting in is like kind of fudging it and making it work. And I was just thinking how what God wants for us is for us to really be transformed into our real, true, original design, and that we find real belonging there.
So Kim has over a decade of experience as a missionary in Mexico, and currently spends a lot of time, I don't know how to describe this, coaching, mentoring, leading women through different processes that help bring healing. So when you were talking there, it made me think about Mexico. But I wonder if you see it coming up in other areas, but what does it look like when you're dealing with somebody and you can tell they don't accept that they are a member, or that they do constant battle with being accepted by God, even telling themselves stories about being accepted by God's family?
I don't know if I even have to answer for Mexico, because I think that we show up like as our own worst enemy when we're not able or willing to believe what God is saying, that we really belong. And it's like I'm already defeated in belonging. So then I'm skeptical. I think other people would do it too, but like I would show up skeptical and questioning rather than welcoming. And it ends up being a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Like we just end
Yeah.
up shutting people out when we already believe we don't belong there anyway.
Yeah.
Is that what you mean, or are you thinking about
Yeah.
something else?
No, it is. It is. I'm thinking, as you're speaking, I'm thinking of different conversations we've had this morning about this, and so my mind goes to different tracks while you're talking.
What's cool, okay, I don't know what conversation you're thinking of from this morning, but I'm thinking of one where um, there might be a person that doesn't believe that they could have this kind of belonging or something. I'm trying to connect the dots, and we become the voice of God into the lives of those people, saying like, you can do this. I see it in you. I believe this, or whatever. And that feels exciting. I don't know if that's what you were thinking about, but it's kind of jumping ahead in the sermon probably.
Yeah. No, but I do love that part. Like as a teacher or speaker, one of the favorite things I like about it is looking into the audience and seeing people's eyes when they're connecting. Like you can just see a light bulb go on and it feels like, oh man, this really matters. And I feel like I feel like we share that same experience when we're sitting with somebody one-on-one, and we can tell the conversation really matters to them. Like they are, through us hearing God say to them, this is what's true about you. This is what's true about you fitting into the body of Christ. And it's so fun to see people's faces light up. So what keeps us from living like that all the time?
Yeah.
I'm thinking about we did this exercise we've done it in different groups, men's groups and women's groups, and we did it with our class that we led a year ago. Trying to think of the name of the class, pastoral leadership, where we had people go through an exercise where they asked themselves, what is it that you wish somebody were saying to you? What do you need to be told, either by God or by a parent, by a spouse? And then we had them give that message to somebody else. And it was so amazing. You're standing around in a circle, and man, it seemed like 50% of the people were saying the exact same thing. The message that they were giving was the message that they needed. And I mean, that just sounds like it just doesn't sound like anything. But it was incredible to watch people receive and watch people give the message.
This conversation and the sermon made me think about when you were talking about Christ being God's beloved and what is communicated to Jesus in the word beloved and in the blessings that he received from God during his baptism. I wondered, I think that our look into the mind of Christ, like when we read the Gospels, it's third person, right? We don't get to really hear what he's thinking. We have to guess at what he's thinking based on what he says and does and what is happening around him. But I wonder, when we see that blessing from God, the messages that God gives to Christ at his baptism, if we're getting a peek at the outside of what Jesus needs to hear, needed to hear. Yeah. I've been thinking about that during this sermon series too.
Yeah. That's fun. I mean, that's neat to get to participate. I feel like that's such a small word for what it means to get to participate with God in that creation. I mean, it feels like creative work. Okay, so what about these messages? And let me just say on the preaching side of this, it's always horrible to watch yourself preach, but on this one, cutting and pasting and typing while preaching, like I want to say that's why I said so many times. Please let that be why. But I thought of that because I'm looking to the side right now, looking at the notes that we had for the sermon. But we reviewed those voices in our head. I am a nobody. I have no value. I'm worthless. I'm only as good as my last performance, good deed. I'm not smart enough to make good decisions, handle any of this. What do you do with those voices when you realize that they're coming online?
That is a good question. I think it depends a little bit on what the message is at the moment, but I think usually I'm like, if I realize I'm listening to a voice like this or I'm hearing a message like this, the first thing I do is like, oh, how long have I been listening to this? I wasn't realizing what was happening until now,
Yeah.
That's just a little aside. It's not what you really asked, but I think.
Well, but that really is huge, though, is realizing that's what has been going on.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to interject just because this is a funny story, but
yeah.
Buddy Hackett, the famous comedian, I remember him from the Love Bug movies, but he said he grew up with heartburn. Like that was just a part of his life, and he didn't know he wasn't supposed to have heartburn until he goes to the Army, and for the first time in his life, he's not eating his mother's cooking. And he wakes up the next morning, and it's the first time in his life he doesn't experience heartburn, and he runs to the infirmary, and he's yelling, "I'm going to die. The fire has gone out." And I feel like that's what it is with these messages. They are just there. And so a big piece of this and why we're spending as much time as we are on it is to say they don't have to be there. It's like living with heartburn, and you think if the message is taken away, the fire has gone out, but God is really inviting us into a place to say, notice the voice so that you can hear my rebuttal. Sorry. Okay. Long break there.
I love that. I'll answer your question in a second, but while you were talking, I was thinking about a verse. It's like just a piece of a verse popped into my mind. It's about tearing down strongholds. Do you know? Did you guys use that in this week's sermon? Or was that just about taking every thought captive, what you guys used?
We used the 2 Corinthians 10:5. We can actually look it up and read it because it talks about demolishing strongholds.
Okay. While you're looking for it, I was thinking, you guys brought this up in the sermon, and I agree with it that you used to think about those strongholds as mostly external, places where we're confronting what's going on with other people or with blatant sin. I think the strongholds of Satan, though, really are the places where I am believing Satan more than I'm believing God. And I think what's a stronghold about it is I don't even know that it's happening. Because once I finally know what I didn't know, then I can choose something different, focus on God and his message instead, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So this is that verse. It's 2 Corinthians 10, starting in verse 3. For though we live in the world, we do not wage war as the world does. The weapons we fight with are not the weapons of the world. On the contrary, they have divine power to demolish strongholds. We demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. And we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ.
Yeah, I think you guys said this, but I'm thinking about it even more. I don't think we can take thoughts captive that are other people's thoughts. I think I can only take my own thoughts captive, you know,
Yeah.
like that's where I don't mean to say that we don't engage in any other spiritual battle, but the thoughts battle, those are mine, you know?
Yeah. So one thing that's coming up for me is the idea of taking the thoughts captive, and that sounds like killing them. And I don't think that's what that scripture means. That you hear the message, "I'm a nobody. I should know more. I'm not smart enough," and we take that message and we just kill it. But I don't think that brings healing. Trying to do that it feels like it's an effort to silence it more. So I feel like one of the things that we're learning to do is to accept that part of ourselves. A couple of weeks ago, I told the story about little Timmy, 4-year-old Timmy, sitting on the back stoop crying, and his mom didn't give him this message. Satan used her words to plant the seed. You aren't smart enough. So what I could do is take the "you aren't smart enough" and just squash it down. Thinking of the dad on Goldberg's, where you can see him physically ingest it and
Tamp it down. Just tamp it down. Yeah, I remember that.
Not healthy. But I can sit with 4-year-old and remind him God is with him. He is okay. Remind him that he's loved and he's cared for. And I think that's a part of this process of taking the thoughts captive. Don't let them rule over us. So I want to ask you something, and I've been thinking about it since we started, and you can say no. You can say I don't want to tell that story. Would you want to tell the story of your teachers board, the student council meeting, or would you rather not share that?
Yes, but I don't know if I know what you want me to say about it. So you're gonna unpack it, or am I unpacking it?
Well, just the thought of the message that you took on.
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, when I was in 5th grade, I was student council president, and a student council meeting that was like the student council and some staff and teachers. It was an unusual meeting, and it was like an ideas time to set direction, you know, exciting stuff for our school. And my mom had actually helped me get prepared. She had packed this manila envelope for me that had a little calendar in it, and I had like the notes, you know. And so I was really excited, and I showed up for the meeting. I got to lead it as the student council president. but those weren't the details that you were wanting. At some point, we have like an open forum, and people are sharing their ideas for the coming year or whatever. And one of the teachers, who actually used to be my first grade teacher and now I'm in fifth grade, she put forth an idea that was pretty ambitious. And I don't want to go into all the details, but she had an unfinished project that we were involved in, unfinished for like several years, but we really liked it. And I think I said something like, and it's painful, honestly, to remember, but I said something like, I'm going to omit her name, Mrs. So-and-so, but I know the name. We all really loved it was a tribal village that we were building in the back of our school. We loved working in that. And I feel like what you're proposing is really similar, and we should try to finish that before starting out something so similar that's new, like so that we can get it done. Well, I realized several things in that moment. One of the things I realized was she was really angered, probably embarrassed and offended by my words. They were just direct. And then I realized I think I thought that we were all equals here, but we're not. And I felt embarrassment myself about that. And there were two male teachers. One was my current teacher, my fifth grade teacher, and the other was another teacher there. They looked at each other and like jabbed one another, like, whoa, when I made that just direct, honest statement. And they said, we should take her to the school board meeting, and I thought, oh, what has just happened, As far as messages, I hadn't thought about it like this. I mean, I've thought about that occasion several times because there was fallout from it with my teacher in the future. It's such a simple story, right? But I had shame built into how it went. And later, I used to, I really respected that teacher. She was my first grade teacher. She taught me how to read. I loved school. But when I saw her later in the halls after that event, she didn't talk to me or like refer to me in the same way. I don't think she hugged me anymore, and I don't think I tried to hug her. So like it was a big change. The message that I received was I maybe like you shouldn't be that honest and you should be more careful in what you say. But I have to think about really clarifying it. It was something like that. And honesty hurts people. Maybe I think that's a lie,
Yeah.
I think it's a distortion because you could be really cutting and rude and that would hurt people, or you could just be honest and that is not intentionally hurting. It's actually how somebody else took it. And I could learn from that experience, but it also carries these messages. What were you?
Well, I hate that I love that story because I know that it's a source of, like, especially the teacher losing that closeness to her. I know that really is a sad memory for you, but I can see little fifth grade Kim, who you are the most competent person I know. Like, you have your ducks in a row, you're extremely intelligent, and I can see you sitting in that meeting ready for the meeting. And it hurts me to think about realizing, oh, you guys weren't serious about us all being on the same playing field. And so I feel like there are themes here that have repeated themselves, where Satan's had the opportunity to say, hey, you were mistaken. You just need to be quiet. So when Satan gives you that voice and you obey Satan's prodding, then he wins and the body loses. And so it just makes me wonder. So I feel like there are a lot of places you could go with this, but watching you deal with conflict management, particularly in Mexico, um, when I was like, let's just keep our heads down and let this blow over. And you were like, somebody's got to say something. Yeah, so I feel like you're a leader in paying attention to God's voice and going with what He's prescribing instead of Satan's pushback.
And I do think, Tim, with just remembering that story and being, in the way of voices and messages, I think there might be times, certainly there are times when Satan's message is a distortion of something that is really a truth of God. Like Satan in his temptations with Jesus, he uses scripture, but he twists it to his own purposes. So I think that like what we're talking about, it's such a bigger thing than just noticing here's something I think I hear, and that's definitely, Satan's words. It's like we're thinking about discernment. Okay, just I'm seeing, I know there's another appointment on this Zoom in our home. That God's invitation to us is to be familiar with Him and to be walking with Him daily so that we really can start to distinguish, oh, that's a falsehood, and it is really disguised as truth from Satan. Like we're going to sniff out the most blatant lies usually, right?
The 2 Corinthians 10 passage, I noticed this word, but it didn't really dawn on me until reading it just now, that it also talks about every pretense. And I feel like, man, that's such a hit us where it hurts, because it's easier to put up a facade, act like, oh, but this is godly, to not hear that voice. And it's pretentious. And we are to take these thoughts captive.
That it says to me, like, the messages that tell me that I'm not good enough, or that would be one side. I hear other messages, or I feel this other pull from Satan, and that's to really to be better, and that I am better, and that is also called out, and put into an appropriate place with God,
So that makes me think of Michael and Claudia when they came and did the Your Brain and Discipleship seminar with our church. Yeah. And when they unpacked the brain and what it looks like, they walked us through an exercise where you go back through a memory and you take Jesus with you. Yeah. So I wonder if you were to go back through the memory that you shared, and Jesus, and you visualize Jesus sitting there with you, what would Jesus say?
I have done the Emmanuel journaling process about a piece of that, probably a message from it. And I think if I were to think about it right now or try to remember what I said then, I feel like some of what Jesus wanted me to know, or wants me to know now, is what you have to say is important. What you have to say is important. It's not like the most important thing, right? But he's like, hey, that's important to me, what you're thinking and what you have to say. And then I think if he's instructing me how to go about that differently with my teacher, it might be like, what she has to say is important also,
Yeah.
It's such gentleness, like he does it in a really gentle way.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. So this makes me think, just for our YouTube or Facebook, anybody that's watching this, if you go to Memorial Drive's Facebook, Memorial Drive's YouTube page, you can look for Joy, Your Brain, and Discipleship. Is that what we called it?
Yeah.
And there's I think 3 or 4 lessons led by Kim where it unpacks more about the Emmanuel journaling process if you're interested in that. Okay, so I have one more question, but in the Rush family, we do have to budget our Wi-Fi usage. And I know somebody is standing right there waiting for you to get off.
Somebody walked away kindly, but did notify me with respect that my turn is almost up.
Yep. Yep.
You should figure it out with your thoughts, though, Tim.
Well, I just wonder if you were the one in charge of what's preached next week or in the months to come, what would be the next step that you would see going forward?
I don't think I've got a quick answer for that, or don't hold me to it, But I actually was thinking a lot about those messages that Jesus was given by God and looking at those and how they relate to what is common to man. I think that's brought up in Sacred Enneagram, that the truths in those messages maybe apply to every person in some way. And I'd like to hear about that.
The truth of which messages, sorry?
Of the, this is my beloved son in whom I'm well pleased, listen to him. And that there was some piece of like redemption for every person in those messages. And that feels exciting to me to think about.
I really like that. And now I can't wait to hear you teach on that. Okay. Well, we better close this out. Thank you very much for agreeing to do this. This is really fun for me. Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Thanks for having me.
We'll talk to you later.
Okay, bye.
Bye.